Now with Justin, we get a good example of someone who expresses the added advantage of the Eucharist. On page 18, there's a beautiful paragraph about the way that he derives strength from the Eucharist, the way that everything fits together in his religious and philosophical experience to strengthen him even for martyrdom. So all of that works beautifully well, and it is a kind of unity that continues throughout the Christian thinking. And it's one of the reasons why there definitely is such a thing as a Christian philosophy. But we're going to take a look at Plotinus, who does not do a Christian philosophy. Chronologically, he comes after Justin Martyr, who died in 165. And somewhere around the year 240, Plotinus moved to Rome. And he had not been doing philosophy as such because he had to make a living. But in Rome, as an old man, people began to ask him to write down his teaching. You know, it was so beautiful. It were things that he had sort of extemporaneously proposed. And as he wrote it down, he wrote in a hurry because his eyesight was bad. He was an old man. And he wrote it in Greek, which was his native language. So the Enneads are the expression of what he is talking about. And it's called that because that's how many that he wrote. I think it's 48 of them. 48 is in Greek. I wouldn't swear to that. But it is the number of the treatises that he wrote. And what he does now is to give us a development of Plato's thought. This is one of the famous Neo-Platonist thinkers. Plato had been dead for about 400 years, 350 to 400 years, when Plotinus writes these things about God. They have the advantage that they are not written as a dialogue. See, everything that Plato wrote is with somebody like Socrates saying something, and then someone like Meno answering, and it gets a little complicated. What Plotinus does is to develop the same doctrine that Plato develops in a straight explanation. So if you want to follow Plato in the dialogues, that's great, and if you can get things out of it, that's fine too. If you're still wondering what Plato was talking about, read Plotinus. And you can find there these beautiful things that Plotinus says. Right? So starting on page 19, Plotinus begins to say what it would be like to go to this one. And Plotinus more frequently calls the one God. So he talks about the God as opposed to the many gods, which he considers to be false. So as he's talking about the God, he says that Plato chose the word one for the God. And since language doesn't really do very well, language is invented for things like, would you please pass the salt? Would you kindly get off my foot? See, language is for stuff, right, that occupies space, right, and can be manipulated. Now, God's not like that. See, God is beyond space. God cannot be confined to space. So God cannot be confined to language, which is developed. See, that's what we call a chair, that's what we call a table. It's developed for space-occupying things. So if you've ever wondered why it is the language kind of runs out of gas, you know, when you're dealing with more abstract things like justice, love, God, well, it makes sense to know that you won't be able to say that. So Plotinus says there are a whole bunch of ways to speak about it. However, the one is probably the best way. And then he continues to develop that somewhat, as you can see on page 19. And he combines these things. See, we get a notion of what intelligence is by our own personal experience of it. And frequently, we run into someone else who is very intelligent, and it sort of opens new avenues for our own thought. It gives us a way to get beyond and into the higher realms of intelligence. And as we move in that direction, we recognize that we're on our way to the intelligence, which is God. So intelligence, good way to think about it. Beautiful is another way. See, when we encounter a beautiful rose, we sort of stop. We say, wow, that's really neat. Okay? That's what they mean by saying stop and smell the flowers. You know, examine, dwell in the beauty of these things. So what Plotinus does now is, because he has done a lot of this stuff, he has contemplated, he has spent many hours of each day contemplating these more intelligent and more beautiful things. He's able to say the intelligence is beauty. And when you pursue intelligence to its source, you arrive at the intelligence, which is also the beauty, which is also the truth, which is also the good. Say, oh man, I can't handle all that. Well, that's right. You don't have to handle it. You know, it's there. It's been there before you. It doesn't need your handling. Okay. So when you are considering all of that, the it, the one, the perfect, the God, doesn't really rely upon your understanding its unity. So if you're having trouble with the unity, don't worry, it's not going to affect the Just work at it some more. Just consider how all these things fit together.
Do you believe that?
Do I believe what?
What Plotinus holds?
No, I don't believe that. I know that. Now, when I first read it, wait just a minute. When I first read it, I had to believe it because I didn't know it. Okay? See, it's sort of like saying, do you believe in Brother Brian? See? None of you believe in Brother Brian. You know Brother Brian. You don't have to believe it. Right? Now you may have to believe in Aristotle, right? See, because Aristotle's not a part of your experience, right? But you certainly don't have to believe in Brother Brian. You have personal experience. So when I first began to read Plotinus, right, I had to believe that this guy is telling me the truth. Like the person who gets to the moon, right? If he says I went to the moon, I would have to believe it. But I wouldn't know that that was the case. Now later on, as I considered the reasons for things to be as they are, I came to know that it is necessary that if there are beautiful things like roses that are beautiful for maybe a day or two, or take care of them for 3, and then they start falling apart, that this beauty can't pop out of nothing. Out of nothing comes nothing. And here we have a rose. And here we have an existing being. Fragile and not very long lasting, but a definite being. And the beauty of that rose has to come from somewhere. And as I dwell upon that, as I wonder about that, as I meditate upon that, then I come to know that the source of the beauty of the rose, the source of the beauty of a rainbow, the source of the beauty of a sunset, the source of the beauty of any person, which incidentally is more beautiful than the 3 preceding beauties, that these beauties have to come from a source which does not have the limits they've got.
Does not have the what?
The limits that they've got. So this is the adventure awaiting you. If you haven't done it already, then what you can do is you can read this stuff. You know, I've given you a couple pages from Plotinus, right? And they're little quotes, and I tell you where they come from in the end, so you could go back and you could get the fuller information. But as you go through those things, you too would want to start. Well, I believe he's talking about something that means something to him. This must be important to him because he's an old man, he's going blind, and he's writing this stuff out. It must be something that he really wants to get off his chest. This is something that other people have said, boy, that's beautiful, why don't you write it up so we can have it? Yeah, and it's been passed down, see? It's not like various things in popular music, that as soon as they're over, we're glad, and we won't have to listen to Chris Kraft anymore. You remember that he won some awards for being the best musician in America some years ago. Now most people don't even know who Chris Kraft is. Right? Probably not. It's some of the 60s that he was. Yeah. That's why they say if you remember the 60s, you weren't there. Okay? Yeah. So all of this stuff, right, has some kind of sense to it. And as you investigate it, as you begin to adventure out into it, then you too can get to the point that you no longer need to believe it. That you know that it's necessary. This existing beauty must be a reflection of, must come from a perfect beauty. Does that help?